There are two parts to the human dilemma. One is the belief that the end justifies the means. That push-button philosophy, that deliberate deafness to suffering has become the monster in the war machine. The other is the betrayal of the human spirit. The assertion of dogma that closes the mind and turns a nation, a civilization, into a regiment of ghosts. Obedient ghosts or tortured ghosts. It's said that science will dehumanize people and turn them into numbers. That's false, tragically false. Look for yourself. This is the concentration camp and crematorium at Auschwitz. This is where people were turned into numbers.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of 100 objects that tell the history and values of Summerhill School. And let's have a look at what this object is. Object 12. So object 12 is the rain. I'm going to start this episode with a story that I have used with young people in secondary schools and at Summerhill, and it's a story about rain. And it's to do with a fine rain that might land on your head one day and around you. And this rain comes from, not from the clouds just above you, which you can visibly see, but from the upper atmosphere. Well, that's where it originates from. As a fine rain from water and ice, in fact, that there's a layer in the upper atmosphere. And where does this water and ice come from? Well, it comes from stars. Yeah, the stars out there, when we look at them, there's many stars that, and they're reflecting light. They're not actually burning like our sun. They're reflecting light, and they're made of ice. So they're made of ice, and they're like diamonds, sort of reflecting the light in the night sky, reflecting it from the sun. And so they must be close to us. Yeah, and they're sort of surrounding our solar system. And sometimes they get knocked out of position. When they're knocked out of position, they become comets. And the comet is attracted to the gravitational force of the sun and has an orbit around the sun. So it goes around the sun in an elliptic orbit, and every time it orbits, it gets closer to the sun. And finally, after so many orbits, it will plummet into the sun. And because it's made of ice, all that ice is melted and vaporized and forms this cloud that is, with the solar wind, is pushed out away from the sun, and some of that cloud travelling through space, enters the upper atmosphere and forms ice clouds in the upper atmosphere. And those ice clouds can then form rain. In fact, if you see the halo around the sun sometimes, it's because of the upper atmosphere and the ice particles in the upper atmosphere. That's an interesting story, and I like it because, and then you can imagine the raindrop coming from the comet that is melted in the sun. Now, I tell this story because it's actually a story that was told during the Second World War, and it's based on a cosmology, a sense of the way the solar system and the universe are built, that was given to stormtroopers. It was a philosophy that Himmler was trying to set up, this institute run by scientists that would create a science for the Aryan race, that would create a pro-Nazi science. And as scientists at the time, a lot of them, physicists and cosmologists, were seen to be Jews, they needed to create an alternative view of the universe. And this was their alternative view, that stars were made of ice. And a scientific centre was going to be formed by Himmler, partly as a present to Hitler, which would be based on this cosmology. I wonder what we can learn from this. One of the things that I tell the story, one of the reasons why I tell the story, is that you then can link to someone called Jacob Bronowski, who does a wonderful series on television called The Ascent of Man. And one of the episodes is about the nature of knowledge and doubt and science. And he dedicates it to Leo Szilard, who was the scientist who came up with the idea of nuclear fission and the threat of the nuclear bomb. And it's partly through Szilard that the Oppenheimer project and the American project to build a nuclear bomb was started. But Szilard was so guilty as a physicist that ultimately he becomes, after the dropping of the nuclear bomb on Japan, or the two bombs, he becomes a biologist, because of the guilt he felt he had as one of the originators of so much human destruction of the innocent. Anyway, Bronowski, in The Ascent of Man, he says, he goes to the concentration camp at the end, and he says, well, what did this? What did science dehumanize people? Did science turn people into numbers such that the millions of them could be killed and burnt, and their ashes flushed into the ponds of Auschwitz? And he kneels down in the pond at Auschwitz and picks up the water and the ashes and says, this was not done by science. It was done by arrogance. It was done by the belief in absolute knowledge with no test in reality. So his firm belief was about doubt, but it was about structured doubt that could lead to testing of knowledge, evidence, and then the building of worldviews based on science. And he linked that also to art as well. And one of the phrases he has in one of his books is, if we lose the sense of truth in what a star is, we lose it in what a man is. I actually think this is quite relevant to democratic schools, because democratic schools and schools like Summerhill and New Ideals in Education are also in a field of alternatives, and sometimes alternatives are driven by people who believe in a sense of alternative knowledge and a world that is not linked to that of Bronowski's sense of truth. It's not linked to the sense of truth of science. And for me as a science teacher, I'm driven by that quote, by the image of Bronowski standing in the pond with his hand holding the ashes of his where his parents' ashes would have been flushed, and his whole family. I'm driven by those images to support children's rights and to support a society based on the philosophy and values of science. Now rain. One of the beautiful times I had at Summerhill was I was in the staff room and looked out the window, and it was pouring down. It was like a tropical rainstorm. It was pelting down, and all the rain, as soon as you stood out there, you got wet. And then I saw these 4 little boys and girls. I think there was a mixed group, and they were outside the staff room window. I watched them for a bit, and they were sort of moving around slowly as if they were in space and moving in different ways. So I went outside, got very, very wet, and went up to them and said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And they said, "Oh, we're underwater, and we're different animals, and we're in the ocean." and then they just continued to play totally drenched in the rain, as fish and an octopus and a crab and various other creatures in their land. And I went back to the staff room to dry off, and I just thought that was a lovely image of children playing in the landscape and playing in the rain. I mean, other stories is that we had a fantastic hike. We would have an annual hike, or several of them, depending. Sometimes the hikes were for the older kids, sometimes for the younger kids, or sometimes for, depending on the distances sort of walked. And I went on one, and after about 3 days, the weather had been changeable. And I think it was the third day and third night that it rained overnight. Torrential rain again, and some of the tents weren't very well put up, or they just weren't very good tents, and a number of the students were absolutely soaked to the skin. So we all woke up at about 6 in the morning, and we had a meeting. It was still raining, so we all sort of walked to this barn, because we were guests of a farmer that Zoe and Tony Redhead knew, and we had a meeting sitting on the straw in this barn as the rain sort of hit the metal corrugated roof. And one of the girls chaired the meeting. We had a special meeting, and we decided some students want to go on, even though everything was soaked. They thought, well, we could try it out as we walk along, or we could walk along and then in the hope that the rain would stop, and that we could try and dry things overnight. And others thought, no, it's all wet, we should go back to school. But if we go back to school, what do we do? Do we give up with the hike? Because the hike was meant for about 3 more days. So what it was voted on was that we go back to school, but we keep separate from the school, because if we went back to school, then we might have to go to then we might have to obey all the rules as if we were back in school, in terms of everything, in fact. In terms of wake-up times, in terms of use of computers and games, in terms of all the laws. So it was decided that we'd go back to school, and then when we went back to school, I think we decided that we would stay separate from the community. So the students, I think it was the little kids sitting room, that they sort of slept there. The younger kids, the older kids, I think went to their rooms, but they kept apart from the other students, and everything, all the tents and everything, was hanging up dripping in the beeston. And the idea was that it would all dry out that day and overnight, and then we'd start again the following day. And we did. We started again, so the whole community was like a community within a community, because everyone else was doing what they do, and we were there. I think we cooked our own food. I think that we just kept as separate as possible. And then they'd all voted that we'd continue this hike as much as we could, and we did, and we ended it, and the weather got better. There was another. Yeah, I was walking towards the house, the big building, which most of the sort of the 10 to 12-year-olds live, and where the staff room is, and the meeting room and the kitchen and dining room and things. So I was going towards the house, and there was a little boy playing in a puddle, and the swimming pool was open, because I could hear the noise of the swimming pool, and I was going to go to the swimming pool. So I said to the little boy, the swimming pool's open, you could play in the swimming pool with water and things. I said, and he just looked at me and then just continued playing in the puddle, whilst I walked off to check out the swimming pool and go swimming. And also, I mean, when it gets really wet, there's a area that floods just by the office, and it's an area which is just below a very nice steep slope, and that slope becomes a fantastic mudslide, and you end up in this pond. It's quite a big pond, because it's a dip that fills with water when it really, really rains, and the pond is then used for games and playing, and for just sort of walking in and splashing in and having fun. So it's a nice image that the community just enjoys the rain, or can enjoy the rain. The rules and laws to do with water and rain is that you cannot climb trees if it's raining, because then it's considered dangerous and slippery, for health and safety reasons. And then there's other laws to do with the rain, which is to do with the mud that you might bring in with the rain. So in terms of the house, where there's rules that you cannot bring in muddy shoes, that you have to clean your shoes or leave them just by the door, so that you don't make mud going along the corridors. And this is to help the cleaners who are employed, local people employed to help clean the school. So, and there's normally a lot of complaints about a lot of the children ignoring this law and just trying to get in as quickly as possible and have a hot bath before, and just ignoring all the rules to do with mud coming into the building, which does cause problems with all the age groups, in fact, sometimes. And there are other times when, we organised a barbecue. I think it was for Guy Fawkes, to raise money for Guy Fawkes, and we put a lot of effort into it. We built an open fire, and we built the barbecue, and it started pouring down. So we moved the barbecue carefully towards under a tree so that we'd get some shelter, and the kids just waited. And we all got soaked, but we all had a fantastic barbecue in the rain. Okay, the other thing is to do with rain and water, really, is to do with water fights. I mean, the swimming pool is a great area in terms of water and fun, but in the summer, in fact, you get people, someone would run around the corner and they would have a fantastic water pistol or gun, and they'd be firing at everyone, and you'd have to shout, "I'm not playing, I'm not playing." And then if they still get you wet, you say, "I'll bring you up if you do that again. I'll bring you to the meeting." And there was one because some of the committees, social committees or bar committees or whatever, trying to raise money, would sell water bombs. They would get loads of little balloons that are sold for water bombs in the local shop in Titlows, possibly the local, which has been there a long time in Leiston, and they would fill them up, put them into buckets, all these water bombs, and sell them for like 20-30p to get money for the end of term party or whatever, or for a social event. And I was thinking of buying some when I was with this group of students, some of whom are selling them and staff as well. And this little boy had bought quite a few. He bought about 5 or 6, and then these two carriage kids, these two older kids, walked past us, and there was a water fight going on, and they knew it anyway. And one of the little kids threw a water bomb at one of the older kids, one of the carriage kids, and as a sort of as a challenge, really. I mean, just to provoke him. And this is what younger kids do. There's a lot of playing of the younger kids provoking the older kids for a chase or for like a water fight. But this time, the two older kids, one of them was very, very... he didn't tend to use the meeting. I don't think he ever used the meeting, unless it was for... not in terms of ombudsman or not in terms of... bringing someone up for something I didn't like. This is a student who felt, and he was a role model as well, so he affected other older students. He felt that he had a right to tell people off, and that included the threat of violence. So he turned to this little boy, and he was going to grab the water bombs and destroy them just by bursting them in the boy's hands. And I looked at him and I said to this carriage kid, I said, "Look, use the meeting." I said, "He didn't hit you, the water bomb, so you can't punish him like this. This is a democratic community where we have a tribunal that you can bring him to, or get an ombudsman, whatever, and deal with it." And he just stared me out. He was very angry, and he stared me out as if I was talking a load of nonsense or challenging him, and then he walked off. But it was at a time, in fact, when there were a number of carriage kids who were not using the meeting, and they were dealing out their injustice, and it was a problematic time in terms of how a lot of young people saw the meeting and saw whether the meeting worked or not, and whether it was relevant to them or not. And another episode, I'll tell a story about what happens because of this. Okay. So that's some stories to do with water and rain, and I hope that they seemed relevant to you. Yes, thank you very much indeed.
Into this pond were flushed the ashes of some 4 million people. And that was not done by gas. It was done by arrogance. It was done by dogma. It was done by ignorance. When people believe that they have absolute knowledge with no test in reality, this is how they behave. This is what men do when they aspire to the knowledge of gods. Science is a very human form of knowledge. We are always at the brink of the known. We always feel forward for what is to be hoped. Every judgment in science stands on the edge of error and is personal. Science is a tribute to what we can know, although we are fallible. In the end, the words were said by Oliver Cromwell. I beseech you in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you may be mistaken. I owe it as a scientist to my friend Leo Szilard. I owe it as a human being to the many members of my family who died here, to stand here as a survivor and a witness. We have to cure ourselves of the itch for absolute knowledge and power. We have to close the distance between the push-button order and the human act. We have to